Recording in progress.
Hello everyone, I'm back already because the last video I put out, which you can see here, called creation / astral projection and a few other astral travel and that kind of thing, got quite a few comments, not only under the video as you can see here, but also in some emails. So I thought, and based on all of the conversations that you can see here, and this one had quite a bit of discussion going back and forth, I thought that I would make a video follow-up basically on this video topic. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to talk about something else really quickly. Let's bring this up for the moment. This goes back to another previous video I put up, and I'll try and link, if you look above here in the top corner, I'll try and link a lot of those videos that I'm talking about up there. So, because I'm not going to go back into all the details of the last video, it would be too long. I want to try and keep this one a bit shorter, try not to lose everybody with too long a video. And but I'll link up above and go back and watch those videos if you haven't seen it or if you need a refresher. But I want to go back to another previous video that I will link, that I titled Blackout. So back in late July, I woke up in the morning remembering a dream I had that was very clear. I may not have interpreted it quite correctly, but it was definitely a clear memory, very real to me. And just to recap on that one very briefly, the part of the dream that I remember the clearest was that it started out that I was at home. It's not the home I'm in now, and in truth it kind of reminded me of the home I previously lived in, or sort of not necessarily the home that I lived in, but more so the area that I lived in, which was back in Ontario before I moved out to Nova Scotia, where I am now. But and also I was younger, like my children were young, I was younger, and the dream started out that I was at this home of mine, and just a normal day, nothing crazy, just a normal day. I went out, and then for some reason I decided to go out, and I found myself in a place that I'd never been and wouldn't normally go, and I was just sort of like following people. That was sort of the more like I just kind of was following some people into this place, and we were kind of going into somewhere, and I went through some place. I was following some people, but there wasn't a roof over top of it, and I could see, like either cyclists on bicycles or on dirt bikes or whatever. You see them when they do those big jumps on those courses that they go on, where they can go around and over ramps and jump stuff. You could just see them going up in the air and doing twirls or whatever, or just going up and down. And I thought, well, this is pretty weird. Like, why am I seeing this? Why am I here? And I was kind of walking to go into, I guess, that area. It was almost like maybe I was walking into like a sports arena or some kind of a place where this track was set up and people were jumping. Like I said, I can't remember if it was bicycles or dirt bikes. Then all of a sudden, it was like this realization that the power had gone out, or there was a blackout of some sort. And then we all kind of turned around and started heading out. Not in a panic or anything, but there was definitely some concern. There's definitely worry about what was going on. And we were all sort of like carefully watching and looking, and I can't remember if we were looking up in the sky or not. But the other thing I noticed as well, and not so much until, there was that scene, we were all kind of huddled underneath this enclosure. Like I said, that as we walked into this enclosure, but as we walked in, I could suddenly see And like I said, maybe I was walking into an arena or something and I could see the jumping. And I was on ground level, and as I walked in, I could see it. I don't remember. That part's kind of not totally clear. But then then it's happened, and then we were sort of like at that enclosure entrance, and we're all sort of looking out. And like I said, the feeling, the sense I had was blackout or power out or something like that. Then the next thing I remember was I was back at the house, and and there was a lot more people in the house for some strange reason. Not just me and my family, but more other people. And we were kind of wondering what was going on, and everybody was sort of trying to figure out what was going on, and they were all talking like, it's not coming back anytime soon. Or that was the feeling in the sense, like it's not coming back right away. It's not coming back soon. And I remember it was kind of like dark. It was like, not only was the power out, but it was dark. And at the time, like I said, I could have misinterpreted this dream. At the time, I just sort of assumed that, well, it's evening or it's nighttime. But that might not have been the case, because, like I said, I was out during the day. It was the day, and then suddenly it was dark, or like twilight, if you will. So that was the first dream I had. And I sort of felt that one was important to communicate out. Not that I have any timing. And another thing was that the feeling of that event was that it was large, meaning it was going to affect more than just me and my local region. It was a very large event, whatever it was, whenever it's going to be. I don't have timing. That's the only problem. So that's why I'm sort of hesitant about bringing out these dreams that I have, or visions, I guess, if you will. But they were very clear, very realistic, and I just don't know timing. But I assume that if I got this, it must be sometimes relatively soon, but soon is relative, right? I mean, anyway, so I had that dream and felt sort of compelled to tell that one. But then I've had subsequent dreams. And I thought, okay, I don't know if I should talk about these. Not that they're super scary or anything, but I just again, I don't have any actionable information to provide you. I don't have timing. I just had the experience of the dream, which was an event. So the first one was this blackout, which is I had at the end of July. The next one I had in August, and it was probably about the middle of August. So not too long ago, but a month ago. And again, the reason why I didn't come out right away with it, because I thought, well, I don't know if I should, be doing this or not. But in the last few days, I thought, well, I better share it. And, and to some degree, it might be just documenting these experiences, right? So they're time stamped and they're here. So the next one I had was related to, I was in another location, which again was not my home, but I was home. And it was on more of a waterfront scene. Like I was in I don't know, for any of you who know anything about the coastal areas, this was in what seemed like a channel or an inlet, or maybe it was a river. That part I don't know. But it almost felt to me like, here in Nova Scotia, there's some really narrow inlets, and there's shacks and cabins down there because there's a lot of fishing here, right? And the other thing that kind of reminded me of was maybe like down in Florida, in some of the swampy areas, or maybe even in New Orleans, or not New Orleans, but Louisiana or Mississippi, those kind of areas, where you're down in the areas where the vegetation's fairly high, but you're on a water. It could be a channel or a river or an inlet. And I was there at this place, and it was in a house, and all of a sudden a wall of water came down this river or channel or inlet, and we were watching it, and I wasn't scared or anything, but it literally went right over the building I was in, which I sort of assumed was my home or something. And again, I wasn't worried or scared, but the water went right over, and nobody was harmed or anything like that. And I remember going out after this happened, and again, it was like the scene of almost felt like it was on a dock or a boardwalk, and there was some other sort of like rickety old shacks and stuff like that there. And I'm going to say this afterwards, but what I was in sort of felt like the building was sort of new, like it withstood this wave of water coming. This wall of water came through, seemed to withstand that without too much problems. And that's actually, nothing actually got damaged, but I just remember like going out afterwards, and there was this like rickety old shack, and there was stuff like that, and there was another person there. I don't remember if it was somebody I was related to or knew, but they were really concerned about everything, and we were trying to make sure that everything was okay. Again, no timing, just sort of general. I remember the scene, but there was no timing. Again, but it might be something that's happening relatively soon. And I'll get to whether this is actually real or allegorical. Then 2 days later, I had another dream. And again, I want to also clarify. When I go to sleep, I don't set any intentions other than I do a prayer before I go to bed. And I'm thankful to God and angels and the Great White Brotherhood and everybody. So I'm thankful for blessings and protection and all that good stuff. I don't set any other intention, I guess I could say. I don't set any intention like, dear God or the Great White Brotherhood, please give me a vision of what's coming so I can warn others. I never do that, never have done that, and I won't do that. When I go to bed, I just do a prayer, and I go to bed. That's it. I don't ask for anything. So the next dream I had was like 2 days later, and this one was a scene where I was with my wife, and we were in this place that looked like old country, maybe even like old European. It could have been like Greece or something like that, because when I explained why I was thinking this, so my wife and I were there, and there was these old pure white stone buildings, and we're somewhere up like on hills and everything. There was no water anywhere around on this particular scene, but we're almost like we're in this place where there was lots of vegetation. There was these old beautiful pure white stone buildings, and then there were some other smaller buildings that weren't stone, but they were also white-ish, not as brilliantly white as the old stone buildings, but there were some other small buildings in a row that were there. And I remember my wife and I were trying to get away from something. I don't remember what it was, and I remember we went into like one building, and it was totally empty. We went in there, and it was empty. There's no windows, nothing, just four walls and a floor and a ceiling and a door. And we went into the first one, and for whatever reason, we're like, no, this isn't right. So we went into another one, and I can't remember how many we went in, but the last one that we went into it. We went into the building, closed the door. These were all identical, and closed the door, and I noticed when we went in there, it was full of computer equipment, like desktop stuff, not like a network room or anything like that. There was at least 2 desks, if not more, and there was just computers set up on them. There was chairs, the computer screen, and keyboards and computers and stuff like that. Nothing was on. They were all off. There was no electricity in the room that I could tell. There was no lights. There was no windows. Yet we could see, I guess maybe just in cracks and stuff, like the light coming in. And I remember we went in there, and I closed the doors closed, and all of a sudden an earthquake started, like a big earthquake. And I remember standing there. I was holding the door closed, and this earthquake was happening, and everything was shaking. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, we probably shouldn't be in here. If there's an earthquake, we need to get out of here. And I remember looking up, and I'm looking at the ceiling, and I'm looking at everything, and I'm like, well, nothing's breaking though. Everything looks okay. So we didn't run out of the building like most people would in an earthquake. We stayed in there. Then it stopped, and my wife and I went out. And at this point, like the reason why we were going there and worrying about other people, that all was gone. Of course, the earthquake kind of took over all that worry and fear. or concern. I don't know, like, I don't know if I was afraid. And during this whole thing, I wasn't afraid. The only time I was concerned was like, well, I probably shouldn't be. We shouldn't probably be in this building, right? Especially it might come down. But I looked up and no, it's perfectly fine. It's not cracking. There's no worries. Then it stopped. We went outside, and again, this is where we were in the more, I would say, modern building. It wasn't made out of stone. We came out. All of the stone buildings were destroyed, ruined. No longer there. Well, they were there, but they were no longer habitable or whatever. So all the old stone pure white buildings were destroyed, and these little buildings were there, and they were fine. Again, I don't have timing if this is going to be a real physical event, but it started making me think, like, are these going to be real events, or is this more allegorical? Is this metaphorical? Like, is this meaning more like we're getting closer to the time of maybe of an awakening? Like all these sort of, well, not the first one so much. The blackout one seems kind of different. That wasn't like an old and new. The last two, the flooding and the earthquake, sort of seemed more metaphorical than physical. But maybe all three were. And I just, take it for what it will. Take it for what it is. Just, I'm just sharing it, putting it down on the timestamp. But the other two with, all the old pure white stone buildings destroyed, and then the newer ones are okay. In the flood, sort of felt like I was in a building that was newer and more secure, and there was old rickety shacks all around. Now, in the flood, they didn't get destroyed, at least that I don't remember. So I don't know. Maybe this is something like we're nearing a tipping point in consciousness. I don't want to say too much. I'm just going to leave it at that. But anyway, I thought I'd put that out before I get on to this. So, if you have any experiences or any other thoughts on my dream interpretations, please leave them below. I'd be happy to read them. Okay, so moving on to further talking about what I talked about on the last video. So, to clarify, this particular image that I created it based on just what I kind of envisioned. But when I created this, I was envisioning more of a sphere, okay? Like this is a ball, but it's kind of sliced in half, right? Kind of like slice the ball in half, and we're looking at the bottom part of the ball. So this would actually be rounded underneath this image, if you want. This is rounded down. There was a top part, but sliced it away and took it away so that we can see the cross section, right, of the ball, the sphere. And the way I had it is I had the 8th dimension in the middle, and 7 and 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Could it be the other way around, that 8 is on the outside and 1 is in the middle? I guess so. I didn't put a lot of thought into that, but it would work exactly the same way, I think. But regardless of which direction it is, it's just for illustrative purposes, and I guess it would matter which way it was. So, as I kind of said before, like we were here in the 7th, we started out on the 8th, and then we moved into the 7th, and then we moved to the 4th dimension, and then because we're now having an incarnation, we're here on the 6th dimension. I just put these randomly, like could have been anywhere. I could have put it over here for the 6th dimension and the 4th dimension over here. It doesn't matter from that perspective. And on top of that, I'm saying on the 4th, we're in the upper 4th dimension when we're there, and how much of that could be taken up in the upper 4th, lower 4th, hell, Summerland, heaven portion. It could take up the whole part of the 4th dimension, or just a quarter of it. I don't know. None of that has ever been really explained, other than probably what I didn't say last time is that the Great White Brotherhood mentioned that, or stated that, every dimension is multitasking, meaning that there could be more than just what we've been told is in a dimension. Like, for instance, in the fifth dimension, they've told us that in that dimension there is the Akashic record, which records all of our experiences and thoughts, and there's also the higher self. So there's at least two things in that dimension, and there's probably a lot more. And as was added, and I also forgot to mention that, is that in every dimension, so in every dimension, there is a space, again, who knows where it could be, but I think they said it was kind of like on the outer edge, whatever that means, that there is a space reserved exclusively for God in every dimension. So even though the eighth dimension may be quote unquote the highest dimension, and a lot of people relate that to being where God is, we now know that God will be and has access to every dimension. There's a location in every dimension for God. So that's all that this was meant to show, is that this was kind of a cross section. It was not meant to show that, in my opinion, that our galaxy or whatever creation is in a 2D plane. I highly doubt that would be the case. I can't imagine how creation would be restricted or limited to being a 2D plane. Especially because in the book, one of the books where it talks about the kindergarten sphere, and I think in some other book it talks about how everything is essentially a sphere, or at least contained within a sphere, right? Like our normal natural state is a ball of energy, a sphere of consciousness. So everything is a sphere. These bodies are only relatable to Earth. These bodies have no relevance or required or needed outside of at least this galaxy, where everything is, physical, if you will. So once we're in the upper fourth dimension, we don't need a body. There's no reason for it. We don't need to do anything that we need here. Like, we need our bodies to actually do stuff on this planet. If we were just a ball of energy, of consciousness, we wouldn't really be able to do much. You can't pick up a hammer and make a building. You could do it with your mind, but then we're with our minds being disconnected from the main Akashic record when we incarnate, and a brand new personal Akashic record being created, basically, essentially blank, and we're no longer connected directly to the main one. We'd have to go through our personal one. We don't know how to do any of that when we come here, right? That's the whole memory wipe part. We have a brand new personal Akashic record created for us. The main Akashic record in the fifth dimension is still there, but we're not directly connected to that, so we can remember everything. We only have our recent memories since we were incarnated. And the older you get, obviously there's a heck of a lot more memories there, but when you're first born, the Akashic record is essentially blank. There may be just some very slight memories there for whatever purpose, depending on your life plan, right? So let's think about this. So all these people that say, well, I remember my past lives. Well, there's many reasons that could happen. Is that you maintained a memory or a connection to the main Akashic record, or as part of your life plan, you wanted to bring into your incarnation some past memories. So again, I don't want to go through the whole thing again about why we're here, and obviously if we're in all these locations, we're connected, because we're, as the Great White Brotherhood put it, we're multi-dimensional beings. So we're, for argument's sake, we could say it's debatable that we're in every dimension, and that probably is true, but saying that we're in every dimension, like, just take for example, so okay, we're connected to the first dimension. Who amongst us has any understanding or awareness that we're connected to the first dimension in some way? Here's an even more relatable we are connected to the fourth dimension. You can go there. you can change your focus in your consciousness and go into Summerland. You can do it. It takes a lot of work through a lot of prayer and meditation and service to God and helping others. Sorry, just one moment. But you can go there. So we know we're connected to there. But how many of us actually have any awareness, feeling, understanding that we're connected to the fourth dimension? I would argue very few. There's very few people that would be able to walk around consciously and be present on Earth and also have the knowing and awareness that they're connected to the fourth dimension. There are some, but I don't think there's very many. Me included. Like, I don't have a daily awareness that I'm connected to the fourth dimension. Okay, so that's about all I wanted to maybe mention on that. We could talk almost endlessly about where is God. So very quickly, the Great White Brotherhood say that our higher self is located in the fifth dimension, and the higher self is our personal connection to God. So, this is, where is God? Well, Great White Brotherhood tell you they can't tell you where God is, but God not only is creation, but is also, outside of creation, right? So God is everywhere. God is everything. So not only, did God create, or God's force, God's essence, the source was used to create the 8 dimensions, whether God did that or the archangels. Again, these are things we can talk about and kind of throw around, but at the end of the day, I don't, we're not probably going to get too far talking about, who created what. Other than the Great White Brotherhood, the only 2 things that the Great White Brotherhood mentioned is that God created the 8 dimensions and stopped at that, and the archangels have created everything else. So take that for what it's worth. Whatever your opinion of that is, that's fine. But so as it stands right now, the archangels, according to the Great White Brotherhood, the archangels create everything from God. And you can look at God as a source of creation, of a source of something that allows all that we see. So the next, let's see here. Then one of the other ones was here, and this image, and the only point of this was that I just wanted to say is that from going from the earth into the upper fourth dimension, the reason that I realized that not only is creation a sphere, the dimensions. So here's where what we were sort of discussing in the comment section and emails was that the dimensions themselves can be, and I think one of you guys talked about this, it would be like bands or rings that are spherical, but they're not a complete, ball themselves. Now, they could be, and we'll get to that in a second, because that was one other thing I was thinking about but forgot to mention in the last video. But so we could look at this as actually, these are sort of the rings, and these would be kind of going this way, and the fifth dimension this way, and the etheric realm this way, and these are kind of like bands or rings around a giant sphere. You could look at it that way, right? But according to the Great White Brotherhood, when you transfer your awareness or your consciousness from the earth into the upper fourth dimension, he said you have to pass through the etheric, then the lower fourth, and into the upper fourth. I find it very interesting that they didn't mention that you would pass through the fifth dimension. The only thing I can think of that is the reason that they didn't say anything about that is because that there would be, I guess, nothing to see, or you wouldn't even maybe notice it, that you would go through there quite like you would if you actually slowly went from the earth through the etheric, through the lower fourth dimension, like I mentioned in the other video, and into the upper fourth dimension. So that's about the only thing I can think of, is that you would go that, from there to there, and you could go anywhere. You don't have to go in this straight line or anything like that. This is just illustrative purposes. You could take the long road to up fourth if you wanted and go over here and here and here and here, but I would think that if the dimensions are true bands of carrier waves, one after another, and you move in a sideways motion, although it doesn't have to be sideways necessarily. You could go in quite a route to get there. You go up and over and down, whatever, it doesn't matter. If that's the case, that it would be, one beside another in, whatever direction you went. You could go up and down and cross and sideways, because when you're in space. So if you suddenly found yourself in the middle of space with no reference, what's up and what's down? You don't know, right? So this is why but if they're beside each other like that, all the dimensions are, around each other, or stacked on top of each other, depending on how you look. If you go, depending on which way you go, although there would be no direction or sense of direction, I would think you'd have to go through the fifth dimension if you went, actually traversed. And but as I said in the last video, and some others commented quite rightly, you could just, I said jump, but you could teleport or whatever, or you could be instantly transfer your consciousness from the earth to the upper fourth dimension, and you wouldn't experience going through anything like that. So that's the other thing too, is right, you can just jump from one spot to another, so you wouldn't actually go through anything. You would just be on earth 1 second and in Summerland the next. You wouldn't even experience going through the etheric or anything like that. You would just suddenly be there. And then Bob talked about that, right? Like, he'd suddenly be on the earth sitting in his meditation, then boom, right into Summerland. So anything is possible. These were just illustrations. It was just the main focus of the video that I made was to try and describe that when I first read about the dimensions that the Great White Brotherhood were describing, the vision I had was like some kind of a flat plane, and that you moved across it or something like that. And then after all the other reading and taking on more information, I realized that's not the case. And they stating that everything is a sphere. So don't take these as this is exactly how it is. It's just for illustrative purposes. And then what I was saying here was that this is probably more what creation would kind of look like, and the thicknesses and all that stuff. Like, don't take that as anything being suggested here. This is just, again, a picture that I got off the internet, and it just was easier for me to use than to try and create something. But if we said that this was the 8th dimension here, and this was the 7th and 6th and 5th and 4th and on, then if you went from, so this is 876, and you wanted to go to the 4th, so you went from here to here. Like I said, we could be over here on Earth. I don't know if I can draw. Oh, that was kind of neat. I don't know if we're here on Earth in the 6th dimension of imagination, and Summerland and all that could be down here. So you'd have to traverse. You could go up and that way and down. Like, who knows? We're only speculating on this, and it's fun to speculate. Like, I really enjoyed not only making that video, but having the conversations in emails and under YouTube. But at some point, we're just sort of entering into the land of speculation, because we just don't know. But that's all I was trying to talk about in this one. And then the other thing that I had was this one. And I remember when I saw this, I thought, well, this is a good kind of explanation. It was kind of like talking about this being the, this orangey outer area being the lower fourth dimension, and this gray silvery being the upper fourth dimension, and that your consciousness would traverse here from Earth. Let's say this is the Earth, and then you would traverse down through, or you would traverse your awareness, your consciousness, from the Earth and the etheric that surrounds it through the lower fourth and into the upper fourth. That's all I was saying. This one, but now, but the other thing I was thinking was that the dimensions also could be independent spheres, not all lined up or stacked up beside each other tightly. It could be like this with connections between. So this could be the third, and this could be the first, and this could be the fifth, and this could be the sixth, and this could be the fourth. And that would explain that to go from the sixth to the fourth, you don't pass through the fifth dimension, because the fifth dimension is over here, for example. Now, if I said it was over here, I apologize, but I'm just randomly putting things out there. I don't know if I have some way to easily mark this, but what if this, again, this is the sixth dimension, this is the fourth dimension, this is the fifth dimension? Well, you could transfer your awareness from the sixth dimension on Earth, incarnation, that of imagination, and then if you actually slowly transitioned your awareness from Earth to Summerland, that would explain why the Great White Brotherhood didn't mention that we would have to go through the fifth dimension as well. Interesting, right? Again, some speculation, because the Great White Brotherhood have not discussed this. This is just me, thinking out loud, so to speak. But I find it interesting that they did not mention, when they were very specific, that you would have to go from the Earth through the etheric, through the lower fourth dimension, and into the upper fourth dimension. They said nothing about the fifth dimension. Why? Maybe it is like this. Maybe when God created, or the dimensions were created from God, they were created as individual spheres of frequency. Because that's the other thing we have to always remember. When the dimensions were first created, there was nothing in them. They're just one frequency. And as I said before, it's not like, here's the 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th dimension, so on. Let's jump over quickly back to this one. So it's not like, let's see if I can get an arrow real quick. It's not like, which way is this arrow going to go? That way. And, sorry, let's make that nice and thick. Let's do that again. Whoops. Undo that. Okay. Let's make it also black. Make it nice and thick. And I've got an arrow. So, whoa. So, let's just say, as you go from a higher dimension to a lower dimension, frequency-wise, that, in the middle part, or on let's split this in the middle again. So in the middle part here is the highest, at the center point would be the highest frequency of the 8th dimension. And when you got to the outer edge here, right, let's draw a line. So once you got to this edge here, it's not the lowest frequency of the 8th dimension, but starting with the highest frequency of the 7th dimension. And when you got to this side, excuse me, of the 7th dimension, oh, I don't know what's going on here. Sorry, just a second. Let's go with this. And let's go with the line, and let's go with a thick one. So when you got to this side of the 7th dimension, I don't know why it's, okay, sorry, but you know what I'm saying. When you got to this side of the 7th dimension, oh, there we go. It's not the lowest frequency of the seventh dimension and the highest frequency of the sixth dimension, and then so on and so on and so on. Oh, I'm probably clicking on those things. All right. That's all I'm saying, is that the eighth dimension is one frequency from one side of the dimension to the other. Whether it's, in whatever direction you go, it's all one frequency. And then what they said, because I went back and looked in the chapters on auras, is that the book on auras, they said that no matter what you place into that dimension, the object will need to take on the frequency of the dimension, but it will also have its own frequency. So that's how it will stay completely separate and individual within the frequency, because they said the dimension itself cannot take on the frequency of whatever object it is, because then that would change the frequency of the dimension. So that right there tells you that the dimensions are one frequency, and that's all they are. They just stay as one frequency. No matter where you are in the dimension, that dimension is that frequency, but your frequency or an object's frequency will change within the dimension, right? So it's not that a dimension can change its frequency. It's not like it's, the eighth dimension is 8 million megahertz, but when you add something into it, the dimension changes to 8,000,001 megahertz. The dimension itself stays the same. All right, so that's the other thing I wanted to mention. So let me get rid of a couple things. So last thing I want to talk about here is, and I try and keep this a bit shorter. I know I get long-winded on these videos. So let's go back here. And so one other thing we're talking about, and I was thinking about this the other day. So let's not think about these as necessarily dimensions anymore. But we can just leave this as it is. So one of the things that was discussed about, and I'll do it here. So let's just talk about the one book that talks about how, as we begin to see and feel the light and the power of Source coming to us, the opposite side of the Source is going to experience the dark times. Okay, so this is for those of you not familiar, they're talking about the pendulum swing of creation going from the times of light to the times of dark, and these are full roughly 600 to 700,000 year swings of the cycle of dark to light. Okay, so yeah, don't think of this as our galaxy and dimensions. Think of this as creation as a whole. So, or at least our creation. I can't say it's all of creation, because there's all kinds of other things like alternate realities and other things that I don't want to get into on this particular video, but I will in another video. So don't think about this as being, but just think of this as maybe being bands of creation, if we will. So if we, as in here on Earth, are on this, we're located here, what the book talks about is on the opposite side, and I guess I'll go with a different color just to make it more interesting. On the opposite side of Source, and we'll talk about, say, Source is here in the middle. On the opposite side, that didn't come in very color, but anyway, hopefully you can see that purpley blue color down here. So if we're here on Earth, and the opposite side people, the opposite side where there's a somewhat opposite of our Earth, meaning that we've been in the dark ages and they've been in the light ages for 300 to 350,000 years. And as the cycle as the cycle evolves. Sorry, excuse me for 1 second. As the cycle evolves, and we on Earth start to get into the light part, and it means that the reality over here on the very opposite side is going into the darkness, okay, which is pretty sad for them. Good for us, bad for them. So that was something I was thinking about the other day, and I thought, well, let's say, just for argument's sake, that the source of all, hopefully this will be able to be seen, is, here in the middle. That's the source of all. Oops. And it talks about, in the book, it also talks about how certain alignments of, they may even say planets, but let's just say things align so that during this point in time in the cycle, we are now going to be able to get the light. And they are not. My first thought and instinct was, well, then this must be the source is dualistic. And I don't know if I can, let's just say that, and it's, yeah. So that would mean that this part here and everything, this half is darkened out. I know I'm not very good at this. This half of the source is darkened out, and that means that, we're now getting the light shining all on this half of creation, and this part is not. But I don't know about that, because I somehow can't see the source of all being half dark and half light. It might be. It could be, and it certainly would make this illustration simpler, that the source stays stationary and all of everything else rotates around it, right? So, this is all rotating. This is, I'm randomly, picking in this direction. So, if let's draw our line here again. So, if this is kind of if this is the halfway point of the rotation, so in this would be, I'm going to really probably make this look horrible. This was, as we passed here, this was 2012 in our earthly years, right? That we passed, as we were crossing right here, when we were previously not here, but we were here when the earth was in this location. Man, I'm really making this awful. When the earth was in this location, this was 2012, that we just crossed. In actual fact, it'd probably more like this. 2012 was this moment when we were just crossed over into the light period of the cycle. And these guys here were crossing over into the dark side. Sound like Star Wars here. But they were crossing over into the dark period of the creation cycle. So there's a couple of ways that can look at that, and so everything's, so the source of all is right in the middle, if you will, and it's stationary. And my first vision and thought was, well, half of it's dark and half of it's light, and this is all in a circle, right? This is a ball, so you have to remember that this is not flat, but this is in a spherical shape. It's just that we took a cross section so we could see it from the top looking down. And everything slowly revolves around the source. And, so the beauty of all this is that we're going to get this whole cycle, this entire cycle here from this side over to this side is 300 to 350,000 years. Well, me being here on Earth and in my mid-50s, I'm not going to see that long. But, the nice thing is that the good news is that the Earth and all of this part of creation is going to experience 300 to 350,000 years of positive times. Now, of course, if everything is exactly linear like that, then we're looking at 150 to 175 years to be right here at the peak of the good times. So if you want to reincarnate in 150,000 years and experience what Earth is like in its prime, then there you go. Which just remind me. So they were asking the person that I was having a discussion with about this part of the Great White Brotherhood's teachings is that our Earth has a moon, but their Earth does not. But we know from the Great White Brotherhood that the moon is a natural object, but has been fitted with something that keeps our spirituality lower, and that's probably for our own good, because it's not only the good people, which hopefully I'm in the camp of good people, keeps our spirituality low, but it keeps the negative people spirituality low, so they can't cause more chaos than they already are. So we have the moon put in place to help us. The other group way over here on this side, opposite to us from source, they don't have a moon, but if you think about it, if they're in the good times, they don't need a moon, because they don't need to they don't need to have their spiritual aspects suppressed, because there wouldn't be any negativity. So could it be that as we progress, so we've just this was in 2012 that we passed, we're now in 2025, so we've only progressed 13 years in a 300 to 350,000 year cycle. So that's why things haven't just instantly become better. So this is going to take a long time for the light that's coming from the source. So you can imagine, like, as we crossed over the light from the source was just really starting to get to us, and then as we move, more and more and more and more is coming to us. So it's going to take a long time for that light, and there could be still other, like, if what the Great White Brother talked about is with other planets and other things were in our way. So let's take another snapshot of this, that there isn't the dark side of the source. It's just all one source emitting out in every direction. It could have been that then, as we were before here, we had other objects in our way, so to speak. Whoops. Oh. Hold on, sorry. There could be other things that were also, rotating around source, as an example. What does that do? Okay. Yeah, well, there, good. That took away that away. So, and then we wouldn't need this either. So as we were rotating around the source of everything here in the middle, there could have been other things, and they all rotate around the source at different speeds. So for the last 300 to 350,000 years, we had other objects in our way that was impeding the light from, the source being able to get through to us. So, but getting back to the moon part. So as all of this light is being able to now penetrate through to the earth and this part of creation, and to bring more positivity here. So as we become more developed spiritually and more light is here and less negativity has any reason or desire to come here, because what would be the point of coming to a completely positive part of creation. So the moon will leave our Earth and be transferred over to this other part where it will be used similar to how it was used on us. Again, just speculation. I don't know if any of this is true. So, but it's just something else to think about. There's more. So, over here we have our galaxy and all of that, that has to do with that and the source and how our little galaxy is and how we can move in amongst our dimensions within our galaxy or creation. Then you have creation as a whole, or at least some part of creation that includes us over here on Earth, and then a kind of a mirror opposite Earth that exists as well, and how the sort of the grand, the larger cycles of creation, how it works around the source and the source's energy being able to get to us. Okay, so I thought that was an interesting point that we were discussing, and I thought I'd talk about that here. Another quick thing I want to talk about, see how this just goes on and on and on forever, and I don't want to make this too complicated or too long. It's too late, I think. But when we think about being here on Earth and looking out into the stars and the darkness, you have to remember and think about that. Even when somebody gets a telescope and they look way out, they're still looking within the sixth dimension. They're not looking into other dimensions. We don't have that technology and awareness, right? When an astrologer or a scientist or an engineer or whatever looks into an extremely powerful telescope, even the ones that are out in space in the Hubble, as far out as they look, unless they've got maybe secretly they have the technology, but at least the stuff that we're allowed to know about, when they look out, they're looking out into our dimension. They're not looking. They're not going to be able to see into the fifth dimension or the fourth dimension. See heaven, as an example. The lower fourth, see demons. They're not going to be able to see it because they're just looking with their eyes, without the awareness that they're not going to be able to see past the dimension that we're in, right? So I had something else on my mind I was going to say, but I just forgot about it. But so let's think about this. So if they had space technology developed enough that we could jump into a spaceship, fly out, and try and find the outer edge of the dimension in our physical bodies, you're never going to find the edge, because as you keep going, you're going to create unconsciously, unknowingly. You're going to continually create more within the dimension. And since there is no space and time, it doesn't matter how far out you go in the sixth dimension. You can go for virtually eternity. You can go out to the point where you die because your body is too old. You'll never get to the edge of the dimension. Your mind and imagination will continue to create as you go, searching and hunting for the edge of the dimension in your physical body. The only way you can go to the next dimension is out of body, right? So another thing to think about. I'm going to stop there because I have made this video way longer than I planned on. And because we talked about so much, I may have forgotten about what other things I want to talk about that we talked about in the comments. So please go back to this string of comments. I'm not going to read it through right now and try and spark my memory because I want to stop here. I don't want to talk anymore about anything. I've already made this video too long. But you can see we've got a lot of topics and discussions from a few of us in here. Please go and take a look at that. Rewatch this video if you need to. And again, relating back to what I talked about with the blackout and the flood and the earthquake. Sounds very biblical, right? Again, I don't know if these are going to be physical events or it was all metaphorical. I don't know. But thank you once again for watching, and I hope this sparks more conversation and more discussion, And as always, feel free to reach out to me not only in YouTube, but in the email. And again, I'm adding this to the very end. Those of you who have at Yahoo email addresses, and there's a few, unfortunately, for whatever reason I can't explain, I get your email, and sometimes a reply can happen, and sometimes it can't. I get an email back saying undeliverable, and I even tried in one instance to delete all of the other parts of the email and just reply back with the reply, just part that I wanted to reply, and it got bounced back too. So I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't know why the Yahoo email addresses are bouncing back, but I don't seem to have a problem with any other emails. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to me on this long, rambling, seemingly all over the place email or video. And thank you very much. And I look forward to any further discussions. And I hope to see you again soon on another video with another topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching this video. Please visit our website at thegreatwhitebrotherhood.org for free books and lessons to help you on your spiritual journey.